I got my tea.
Okay, we are live.
Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon. We want to welcome you to this week's episode of What's the Tea? I'm Lysandra Hutchinson, and I have our South Suburban Family Shelter Executive Director with me today. Hey, Jennifer. And so Jennifer Gabrenya is here, and Jenny has been on, I think, every month. Haven't you come in once a month?
I missed September.
Okay.
I think I'm on 3 months except for that.
Yeah. So we're so happy to have you back. And so if you guys can just take a moment, share this video with your followers. You can grab your favorite tea. I'm drinking green tea today. And just join us for an amazing discussion. Yeah. You guys can go ahead and share this video.
I'm just having coffee.
You're having coffee?
So if you have coffee, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's what I have.
Tea or
I
coffee?
had a big lunch and I regretted it because it made me feel sleepy.
Oh. I think we've all done that. Yes, I've done it a million times. So you guys can grab your tea or your coffee or your water and just sit back and relax and tune in today for our episode. We have an amazing discussion coming up. And so Jennifer is going to give us a broad, kind of a broad picture and a broad framework as some of the recent issues that are facing domestic violence organizations. And many of you that are following us have seen that we have been dedicating all of our interviews this month to Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so our interviews have touched on all kinds of things. We broke down the dynamics of domestic violence. We highlighted someone from our abuser intervention program. And then last week we had Angela on, who finished our sanctuary program and is now also is not only a victim survivor, but also a domestic violence advocate herself now. So we're super proud of her. And Jennifer, we talked last week about how domestic violence is an issue that's impacted by so many other community and societal issues. And many people don't understand just how much that's true. But recently, from your perspective as a leader of this organization, you have been impacted and heard from other people in the domestic violence community and other organizations about the ways in which people are feeling about how domestic violence has been addressed and how it's impacted different communities. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so what has been so interesting about the past, 7 months now is that we have been experiencing and are seeing firsthand intersections of some issues with domestic violence that I think people may have thought were pretty separate before. So first with COVID, you're looking at public health interfacing, right? So we're looking at something that generally people are thinking about as a health issue or maybe as a public health crisis. And we're able to see very clearly how that is intertwined with people's ability to achieve safety or to find safety. And so you're looking at this public health aspect, and people who work in the health field aren't going to be surprised by this at all. I think particularly makes me think of Kayla's interview, right? Where she was able to weave in so beautifully this idea of maternal health and how that intersects with violence against women. And here we're looking at public health and how that intersects against violence against families, and how the responses to the public health crisis make sense for the public health crisis, but actually increase vulnerability and risk for families that are experiencing abuse. So that's an intersection that we're we're still trying to find our ways through. And then in the midst of that crisis, the other crisis that we had come up, which isn't at all a new crisis, but I think just had renewed attention, is the fight for social justice and racial justice in the United
Yeah.
States. And I think that people who are, again, within movements that are looking to end violence are very aware of how race, class, and abuse intersect with each other, but those that are outside of it are not. And I think for South Suburban Family Shelter, it's critically important that we be able to be upfront about that, because of communities that we live and work in and the communities that we serve. And I don't know that people realize that about 75 to 85% of the people that we serve at South Suburban Family Shelter don't identify as white folks. You know, we serve people of color primarily at our organization, and there is just no way that we can go about our work without recognizing how that intersects with the experiences of abuse that our folks have.
Wow. No, that's really powerful. You sent me the document, the Moment of Truth, like the Day of Reckoning document, that was circulated among different domestic violence agencies. And I was really just struck by just how powerful that was for everyone to just kind of address some of the gaps maybe in services, and kind of address the fact that this work should be being done better, and that there can be improvements made. Can you talk more about that? Some of the discussion?
Sure. I'm going to give just a little bit of context for everyone. So we are in Illinois members of a state coalition, which is the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Every state in the United States has one, and they are then members of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We like coalitions and associations here. And so the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, you know, in June, in the face of a lot of the media coverage that was happening, put together a statement that they called the Moment of Truth, which essentially is a recognition and an acknowledgement, I would say, of how white privilege has colored the domestic violence movement since the early days. And for us, the domestic violence movement is very young in the history of all things. In the 70s that, you know, it started. So I remember a couple agencies ago that I worked at, agency was founded the year that I was born.
Wow.
It was always kind of like in my mind that the agency was as old as I was. So I always think of like, the movement's about as old as I am.
Right. I've grown up with the movement.
But I think a piece of that is very important, and that was discussed in detail in this document, is that very early on, you know, domestic violence was never seen as a crime. So I think that we are all used to the idea of, if somebody's hurting you, call the police. That's generally what we would say, and that's generally what people think. When the movement started, there was not an option. That's not what people automatically thought. And when people tried to do that, they got little to no response. I mean, it wasn't something that generally, because domestic violence wasn't a crime. So law enforcement enforces laws. They respond, you know, to laws that are being violated. And there, by and large, were not laws against abuse in your family. So that was the big push at the time, is this is wrong, and this needs to be illegal, and this is the kind of accountability that we want to see. But communities of color and Native American communities from the very beginning were like, I don't know about that. I'm not sure if that.
I don't know if that's the best course of action.
I'm not sure, right, that that's the best course of action, and if that's going to work for our community. And so this document, I didn't read it right before we got on, but if I recall, you know, says, you know what, we didn't listen. You know, those of us white leaders of the movement didn't always listen to the women of color that were telling us ways in which we needed to be cautious about moving forward. And there have been lots of people within the DV movement for years now that have been saying, I call them unintended consequences, and maybe they were, and you know, I'm not sure. Some people saw them coming, and some people didn't.
Wow.
But we know within the domestic violence field, it is not new to us that not everyone wants to involve law enforcement or use the criminal justice system in the response to their issue. That's not new.
Right.
Domestic violence advocates from the very beginning have been creative and thought of ways to seek safety, come to safety, find accountability without involving these particular systems, because there are large groups of people that it doesn't work for.
Mm.
And this document comes out and says that quite plainly, and states that the movement as a whole in the United States definitely has work to do to be able to consider and bring in all of the voices and really think about what are the ways in which going about this work that works for everyone and not just a narrow
Yeah.
of folks.
Wow. So can you maybe walk us through some of the just the different dynamics, such as like those protective factors, those risk factors, and kind of speak to how we can make a difference. How can communities make a difference? How can organizations make a difference? How can individuals make a difference? I think that like as we're watching the news, we talked about how there's so much suffering going on, there's so much pain going on globally. Um, it can be difficult to not feel helpless and to not feel as though, or to feel a sense of collective powerlessness. So what types of things do we need to understand to feel empowered and to know how to use our resources as a community to do this work better?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we fail to do is that we fail to focus on prevention enough.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
focus a lot on services, and which again is, I believe, where our foremothers were coming from. You know, let's get people to
Mm-hmm.
safety, let's get them into shelter, let's create orders of protection, you know, all of those things. And those are good things for after the fact.
Yeah.
But many of us, you know, we want a world where violence isn't happening anywhere. We want we want to create a world of peace,
Yeah.
and so you need to be preventing that from the ground up, and you can do that in all sorts of ways every day. So I'm going to do my fun screen sharing
Okay.
and do like a quick and dirty violence prevention 101
Yes.
here. So my favorite thing in the world, right, I know I'm
No,
very
it's like we grow to love this. We just begin to love the concept. Yeah.
So it's talking about risk and protective factors. Most of the time people talk about risk factors, and I'm actually think I'm going to scroll away from those because I feel
Okay.
like it's very easy
Yeah.
to focus on risk factors. Obviously, a risk factor is something that puts somebody more at risk for experiencing whatever the negative thing is. But there are so many protective factors, and
Mm.
there's a great gentleman who has since passed that worked in the Chicagoland area, Dr. Carl Bell, who has always said that risk factors are not predictive because of protective factors. And
Mm-hmm.
protective factors are what we want to put our energy in, are what we want to build up, and what we can do
Yeah.
every day. Everyone can do this. So your protective factors can be on your individual, I'm going to do stars because it's fun. It can
Okay.
be in your individual protective factors. You can have family protective factors, and you can have community. And this one is particular to school protective factors, which is why I've been lamenting during the whole pandemic that kids can't be in schools, because they are really truly protective of kids. And it would be lovely
Mm.
if they could be there. So
Yeah.
you're talking about things like resilience, which people talk about a lot. You're talking about things like being able to have positive responses with others. You're looking at conflict resolution and anger
Yeah.
management skills. And so things like that are reflected, these in particular, in the prevention work that we do here at South Suburban Family Shelter.
Yeah.
We have a couple of different programs that really are talking about those kinds of things when you talk to younger kids. And those are things that you can work on and do every single day. The healthy parent-child bond is a huge
Yeah.
factor. In fact, having a strong relationship with one adult that feels supportive of them is the number one protective factor for
Wow.
any child. So when you think of feeling helpless and hopeless and what is something that I can do, it seems small, but having that strong bond and building up the children in your life, quite frankly, is one of the strongest things that
Wow.
any of us can do to work towards the world that we want to see. And I think that that's where I would encourage people to try to be. And what I try to do is look forward, be future focused,
Yeah.
um, to where it is that we're going and what world we want to create for ourselves and what world we want to create for our children. And if you have children in your life, being that one adult for them,
Mm.
incredibly strong thing that any of us can do, quite frankly.
Wow.
I think another of them that are really important are related to these community protective factors.
Hmm.
Don't know how to get rid of my stars. They're going to keep stamping everything. I think I have to turn this part off. Okay, so this one I think is really challenging right now. So having a connection to the community and a sense of belonging is
Yeah.
incredibly important for people. And that's something that has been really impacted during COVID. So I'm switching my screen
Okay.
shares. We're going to play it up a little bit. Because in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, belonging and love is a huge piece of it,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
having that sense of belonging. So finding ways to do that. So again, feeling helpless and hopeless with everything that's going on right now, how can I come back and focus my energy on connecting to the people that are important to me
Wow.
and having this sense of belonging. Um, and I know one of the things that we do here that's little in our little Harwood office is that we use Microsoft Teams as a way to try to stay in touch with each other.
Yeah.
We don't get to see each other anymore. We like and appreciate our office culture, and it's
Yeah.
a little way that we have to try to keep that going.
Yeah, and it's great. It makes a huge difference. I think it makes a huge difference for us feeling just staying connected to each other on a day to day in a way that's not always so formal, but to kind of keep up just that rapport that we have in the office. So I'm glad. I'm glad that we have that. It definitely makes a difference for just like the sense of belonging.
Yeah, I think that's been the good thing. There's a lot of negativity sometimes around the internet and social media and how we've all kind of gotten sucked into it. But right now, it's incredibly important to stay connected to each other because we need that to be
Mm,
able to reach our full potential. We need that feeling of connection and belonging to each other. And oftentimes it's, belonging has to do with people who think like us, and are going
mhm.
to support the kind of things that we want to have supported with us. So it's
Yeah.
not just, you're around people or that you're mindlessly scrolling through, your feed on social media, but you're actually connecting
Mm,
and you're sharing things that you like with someone
mhm.
else. And those are ways in which you can find actually feeling like you belong with a
Yeah.
certain group or even with another person.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a powerful point. So then there's the belongingness and love, safety, protection, and security, and then the physiological basic need for survival. Okay.
I feel like those last three pieces right now is everything that's happening.
Yeah, right. It is. It really is.
It is because right now, when you take COVID-19, people are really frightened for their physical health.
Yeah.
Um, certain segments of our population are much more vulnerable and have been dying at much higher rates. So it really calls to this physiological need that we have. This is the basic bottom line
It's
needs.
basic. Yes. Gosh.
has to have. And I feel like in helping professions, we're really good at thinking about that with our clients. We're very clear that the people that come to us, and I know that our constituency, they're very clear that people who are coming to us need to have this. You know,
Yeah.
they're very highly invested in making sure that we have enough money for shelter, that we have enough food for the people that come to us, clothing, all of those things. It's very, very clear. I'm not entirely sure that we're always thinking of how that's still important for people who aren't seeking services. Or
Mm,
there's a lot of people who have those needs that don't know how to seek services.
yeah.
Um, and then it goes, I think, pretty quickly into safety, protection, and security, because you have folk that are continuing to work. This
Yeah.
one, I like this particular version of the hierarchy because it talks about occupational hazards, which,
Mm,
you know, that's going on for so many people
absolutely.
as they're trying to move through the pandemic and continue to meet their basic needs by having an income. But at
Yeah.
the same time, some of these needs here in the green, they're struggling to meet. So until you can have these things covered, you can't move, you know, further up. And so I think that's where we all need to be right now. I'm afraid that, and sometimes I feel like it with myself, I feel like I need to be at self-actualization. I need to, I need to be solving all of the world's problems because we're helping people and that's what we want to do. But I think the reality is that a lot of people are much further down here. And that's the best way for our energy to be focused right now, because we have to have these needs met in order to get to the point. And we have a lot of work to do,
Yeah.
and we need every single one of us
Yeah.
to be able to come along to do that work.
Yeah. This is really enlightening. I think even just as an individual, on an individual level, because it brings to light, just even for me as a mom, what I can do. Just the fact that being a strong parent is being a part of the solution. Spending time having dinner with my children at the table, right? And being available to them.
Yes.
Looking at this, it helps me process it in a way where I can say, this is this is a solution to a much larger societal issue. Even though it may feel minor on the day to day, but it's not, like you said, because we're all interconnected, and these things are interconnected, these actions. So that's really enlightening, and I think it helps just the viewers that are watching this see their daily behavior as more significant, by understanding how it impacts the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And I think the ways in which our youth grow up are going to shape, you know,
Hmm.
shape the world. They're going to shape the
Wow.
future. You know, I know that everyone always thinks it's cheesy when you go back to, you know, Whitney Houston and the children are the future.
I sang that in
They
my kindergarten
are,
graduation. Yeah. But it's so true.
yeah,
Right.
they are.
Yeah.
And some of the issues that some of us adults are surprised that we're still dealing with certain kinds of issues. And it's like, well, my generation was supposed to get it right,
Yeah.
and my generation hasn't got it right. So, you know, what work
Yeah.
can I do now, and how can I continue to build up, you know, the next generation? So that this is multi-generational work, right?
My
That we're
goodness.
going through. And I think that that is part of what leads to feeling helpless about it. I have to remind myself so many times that the DV movement and the anti-violence movements in general are so young, because
Yeah.
it's not 1 or 2 generation work. You
It's,
know, 3, 4, 5, it's 6 generation work. I mean, it takes a long time, and it's believing in a future that we might not get to see, but we know that it's possible.
wow. That's a great point. With that point, I think this is a great time to ask you this question. As a visionary and as a leader, really a leader in this movement, knowing that it's a multi-generational job or task, what are the specific impacts or marks that you want to make um, through the work with South Suburban Family Shelter, or in general, through your efforts and through the efforts of our agency? What type of changes or I guess like goals do you envision making?
Yeah, my The biggest thing that I would really like to see, I really would like to see prevention work become a central focus in the work that we do. We have done an amazingly fabulous job of building up services
Yeah.
to people who have been harmed, but unless we put significant efforts downstream,
Yep.
we're not going to stop it. And that,
Yeah.
when I say that, I mean, I really mean that I want there to not be, I want a world of peace. I don't want to live in a world of violence. I don't want my son to grow up in a world that is full of violence and where, a third of the people are experiencing abuse in their homes.
Yeah.
I don't want that to be such a natural and normal way. I want to see a world where it's easy to have compassion for the person that is on the street next to you, no matter how it is that you're interacting, where your go-to is to have compassion and grace for the people that are around you, rather than where we are now, which I fear is disconnected and distrust as a starting place.
Yeah.
And I really think that we need to have a shift in our focus in order to be able to achieve that.
Wow, that's awesome. Are there any other maybe issues or strategies that you hope to employ in your position as the executive director of South Suburban Family Shelter, or just as a leader in general in this domestic violence movement?
The other thing that I love a whole big lot is talking, which is related, but is talking about trauma, which everyone is all talking about all the time, and
Yeah.
trauma-informed care and what it looks like. And that really goes back to that compassion piece, what it looks like to be a trauma-informed organization or to have a trauma-informed
Yeah.
community, and just helping people understand how to do that kind of work, and obviously for us continuing to work on it
Yeah.
every day and all the time, and just seeing how much better we can get at South Suburban Family Shelter of being able to do that, and to think
Yeah.
of new and different ways of making sure that we are heading in that direction. It's constant work. It's constant, do some stuff, reflect, adjust,
Yeah.
and do some more stuff, reflect, adjust.
Yep. Yep. And constantly like fine tuning and learning as we go. And yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to go to Zach and just see if we have any questions in the chat.
Okay, we don't have any questions. I think we were all engaged and sucked into that conversation.
It's a good conversation. Okay. So I'm just, while we're waiting, Jennifer, are there any other things that you wanted to share or any other thoughts as we're closing out Domestic Violence Awareness Month?
Oh my goodness. So the whole field to me, and the way that I think about the work, has evolved so much from the day that I started doing it, and it seems so much bigger than it used to. I sometimes
Just
wish
gets
I
bigger
could
and
go
bigger.
back to the beginning where it's like, it's this thing and we're going to laser focus on that one thing. And it's so broad, but at the same time, there's particular values that we can keep looking at that are so relevant for it. And I see that moving through the work that we're doing, and even how we've had to try to adjust to the pandemic, and really thinking about what does outreach mean? What does it mean to try to spread a message to everyone and connect? So I just feel like this concept of connection, and how do we connect to as many people as possible, is something that we've been thinking about here at SSFS in a much broader and different kind of way than we did before the pandemic. And I think we're going to continue to unpack that and think about what that means, because it really that really feeds where we're going. You know,
Mm.
everyone's not going to come to us. Everyone who needs our message or needs our services or could benefit isn't always going to come to us. So how do we connect with them? And I think I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's just been really interesting to see that
Wow.
develop.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. I guess the pandemic, although it's a crisis, it has also pushed us toward innovation and new thinking and new strategies, like what you're saying, because we've had to get out the box.
We really had to get out of the box, and I always want it's like it catapulted us to do things
Yeah.
that
To do.
were kind of in the back of the mind or a little bit, and it was like, you have no choice.
Yeah.
You have to keep the faith now and figure out where you land. So it's odd that
Wow.
there are a lot of so many negative things about it, but it's interesting how it has pushed us to do things that are very positive that I don't think that we would have done had we not been in this situation.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. It's awesome perspective too, and reality. Um, I know we're going to wrap up soon, but I just want to check back with Zach and see, are there any questions for Jennifer?
Yes, so we do have one question, but it is a popular question because it has 4 likes already. And it's a follow-up about prevention. So what is your vision for prevention after COVID? What is SSFS preparing for?
Oh,
That's a good
well, I
question.
got to be honest with you. I might be the executive director of SSFS, but I don't actually always know what everyone's because I have really great teams and really great staff, and I often trust them to go off and continue to be awesome. Some of the things that I know that we're looking at again is very much that idea of how do we connect out in the community in various different kinds of ways. I know that your team in particular is really thinking about, you know, how do we reach young people in different ways, and what's that going to look like in the digital age, so to speak. And we're also very much trying to look at what role does partner abuse intervention play in prevention, which is a very different
Mm.
angle to be thinking about prevention. Again, we often focus our services on folks that have had violence done to them, primarily when they come to us. And again, when you think about prevention, you want something to stop. So when you kind of break it apart, it makes sense that you would want the person who's doing the harm to not be doing the harm anymore. Yet there is not, there aren't a lot of resources that are put into that. So that is a long-term goal at South Suburban Family Shelter, is to really build up the partner abuse intervention program to really mirror almost like the robustness that we have in a counseling program, and to really try to figure out what it is that happens. I think I've said this before, even here on T, that I don't believe that anyone is born to hurt another person. That there's something that happens within someone's life, you know,
Yeah.
that sends them to that path. And what if, you know, it's my big what if question. What if we could get there before that? You know, what
Mm.
if people had the kinds of interventions that they needed earlier on in their lives? And so then they make different choices.
Mm.
So I think that that's a long vision
Yeah.
for South Suburban Family Shelter, but that's a direction that we really want to go in, and I think that's part of the idea with the bro groups that you all facilitate in community education, is talking to folks that are younger, that maybe they have used violence already, or maybe they, you know, we know they've got some risk factors going on in their lives where they could. How do we intervene? How do
Yeah.
we, you know, be able to? It's odd, but how are you able to show compassion to people at the times when they need it the most?
Mm.
because
Wow.
we know that many of the people in our program and in other partner abuse intervention programs have experienced trauma or have themselves been abused at very young or at other points in their lives. And so it really begs the question, did they need something that they didn't get?
Mm.
And what would it have been like if they got that?
Wow. No, that's really powerful. I think so many people really appreciate our abuser intervention program, and are excited about it when they learn about it. Yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome perspective, I think, and um, goal in terms of moving forward. Zach, are there other questions in the chat?
There are no more questions.
Thank you. So Jennifer, is
It's
there
my
any?
fastest interview ever.
I, I think we're so well prepared for the. So are there any other things you wanted to add before we start to wrap up the interview?
Oh,
I mean, you said.
yeah, I've talked about it all. You could ask me any question and I'll answer it. The things I think that are going on in my mind. I know that a lot of people, we're tired right now. You know, COVID's been going on for so much longer than anyone expected it to be going on for. And I think the news media continues to lift up all sorts of stories that are incredibly disheartening. And I just know that in order for us to create the world that we want to see, we can't get bogged down. You know, we have to be able to find ways to keep going because the world needs us to, and we need each other. Again, that connection and belonging, to be able to lift each other up. To do that, you know, to be able to find the ways to say, okay, I need a little bit of a break here, but I'm going to trust these people are going to do the work so that I can pull back from the work. And then when they need to pull back, I can come forward and do the work. And how do we need to create an interdependence with each other, and also to be able to be okay that we're not, we don't all have to be superheroes.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, when you care about a cause or multiple causes, you feel like you have to solve it right away. And it's hard sometimes, like we were talking before, to realize that there are small everyday things that you can do that are building towards that future. And that I have to remind myself very often that raising my son in a very particular kind of way is a way of creating the future that I want to see in our world. You know, that is incredibly important because who knows who he's going to impact, you know, who knows who kids are going to, we don't know who they're going to be, right? We don't know what they're going to accomplish. So why not set it up as best as we possibly can, you know? And if anything, if I can raise someone who lives their life with kindness, that will contribute
So good.
to a peaceful world, and that is valid, and that can be enough.
Wow. Thank you, Jennifer. I think I speak on behalf of all of us at South Suburban Family Shelter when I say that we appreciate your passion, how knowledgeable you are, and just your leadership. So thank you for being a part of this interview today. It was a pleasure. So we want you guys to join us every Tuesday at 2:00. Every single Tuesday we are here. We're going to have another What's the Tea episode for you. So be ready. Join us with your tea. Same time, same tea. Different episode. I may have messed that up, but it's okay. Thank you guys for joining us. Zach, thank you so much for doing the tech. And thanks again, Jenny.
All right. Bye.
Bye.